Hey there, everyone. My name is Brady Dale, and I'm a reporter for The Defiant, your key news source for all things crypto and decentralized finance. I'm here today to talk about investing in the crypto scene and where that's going, where it's been, what's interesting right now. I'm here with two investors, Imran Khan, a partner at the DeFi Alliance, and also part of Bolt Capital and VentureDAO. We'll talk about those things. And then also Chris McCann of Race Capital. How are you guys today?
I'm good. You?
I'm great. No complaints. Well, it's really actually a really hectic day. I'm trying to get like 3 stories done, but I filed one at midnight last night, but I'm good. I'm good. What about you, Imran?
Doing great.
Did we lose? Okay, great.
Yeah,
good.
Doing well,
Awesome.
doing well.
All right. Well, we're here at a Solana gathering, so let's just start with Solana. It does feel like it's the buzziest blockchain that's not Bitcoin or Ethereum right now. Maybe that'll continue, maybe it won't, but I sort of do think that that's true. It had I feel like both of you, if I understand correctly, have done some investments in the Solana space. Did this week's hiccup make you guys feel any different about that move? Put the hiccup into context for people who are interested in Sol out there. Why don't you start, Imran?
Yeah. I'd say that, when you're trying to replicate what's happening on Web 2 to Web 3, we're going to run into, transitionary issues, right? And so what Solana is ultimately bringing is, high throughput, high fidelity infrastructure that's being built so that it could provide the best services for users. And because of that, you're ultimately going to run into some hiccups. And that's happened to Ethereum previously. It has happened with Bitcoin as well, and Arbitrum most recently. So I do think this is going to be a bit common, at least for the next year or two, but over like a 10-year time frame, it's being prepared for large scale, massive adoption and use cases. So these are some smaller hiccups that we're seeing, but long term, we're pretty bullish.
Yeah. I guess for me, I comment everything Imran said. In addition to that, I actually feel much more positive after all that. One of the biggest criticisms of Solana is that it's centralized. There's only a few validators, that they're all part of the same entity. And as you can see by actual example, it's actually not the case. When the patch was fixed for it and pushed out there, you needed 80% of all the 1,000 validators of the Solana ecosystem to all update at the same time. And if it actually was centralized, this would have taken like 10 minutes because they all just would have coordinated and did it all at the same time. But because Solana is an actual decentralized network, you have to coordinate against multiple parties, multiple geographies, multiple time zones. Everybody wasn't necessarily awake at the same time. And so for that fact, through little example itself, it actually showed how resilient the network was, how decentralized it is, and how it actually functions and operates. And the validator community really sort of picked it up upon themselves. And if anybody was hanging out in the Discord in there's a lot of camaraderie and community in it, but it really truly is a decentralized kind of ecosystem.
And it seemed I did write about this, but I haven't really followed up since then. But there wasn't really much of a hit to Sol price, right? It seemed like maybe the market had agreed with you guys. Is that right?
Yeah, there wasn't two things. Yeah, there wasn't a huge effect on the Sol price itself. And then the other thing that a lot of people were worried about was as soon as the Solana network restarted, there could have been a kind of huge mass of liquidations or empty order books or anything like that. But the whole network actually handled it fairly gracefully. Most of the liquidators didn't really see anything kind of in excess of normality. Most of the order books came online fairly quickly. And so even in a pretty bad situation, it could have been way worse, but the network handled it fairly gracefully for all things considered.
And mind you that the price had 5x'd over the past 6 months. So
yeah, totally.
It's doing pretty well, in my opinion.
Yeah, totally. And all of this, if I understand correctly, for a token for a decentralized social network, which is a bad idea, everyone. Well, sorry, that's just my take. I'm not into crypto social networks. So what's you guys' take on why is this the buzzy moment for Solana? Why are folks going there quickly now? Like why is it a good spot for, DeFi and other things to build on at the moment?
I had a talk with my brother yesterday, and he did a Uniswap transaction, and he complained to me that he had to spend $300 to do a transaction. And he asked me he asked me if I could use something else to buy crypto. And
Uh-huh.
that's like a perfect positioning for Solana, right? Like there are
Hmm.
many people like my brother that are all over the globe that are looking for easier ways to get into DeFi, and so that they can
Hmm.
leverage all of the core components infrastructure that's being built, so that they could use it to the day-to-day lives. And so I think one big value proposition that Solana offers currently is the fact that you could do, high throughput, high fidelity transactions. And builders see that as a way, as a growth opportunity to continue to grow their subscribers. A key example is Phantom building on Solana over Ethereum. Phantom could have built on Ethereum, but they decided to build on Solana for those reasons and to compete against MetaMask by acquiring its users. And then ultimately, over time, I could see them going everywhere else. So Solana could be a good reason why people will build and then bootstrap their users and then tend to kind of go multi-chain after that.
Yeah, I also echo everything Imran said. I guess two things to add to that. One is Solana is built for scale, for speed, for high transaction throughput and low cost. And I think finally people are starting to wake up to it, that this is not some dream or some theoretical concept. This stuff actually works. And it works not in just theory, it works today. I think especially after the Degen ape drop, a lot of people finally went through the process of setting up their Phantom wallet, actually using some of these things. There's a lot of the core infrastructure layers that are there that exist today. Again, this isn't just in theory, this is in reality. A real example is I did a interview sort of live on YouTube where I went through a bunch of the Solana applications themselves. I started with $1,000 of real money. Again, it was just for fun, showing and playing around with all these apps. So I use Saber, I use Sunny, I use Radium, I use Parrot, I use a bunch of these other ones, actually going through the full process of being an LP, staking, unstaking, going back. And I started with $1,000, and at the end of it, I think I ended up with like 955 or something. So I spent, just a few dollars, and this is all inclusive of all fees, all loss, all transaction costs, all the withdrawal fees, and everything. And again, like this stuff works today. Like this is all live, real mainnet stuff. This isn't testnet transactions. This is real, real assets that it actually works with.
I was hoping you were going to say you closed with like $1,010, but still that is good. It didn't cost that much. Cool. Yeah, that's interesting. If you guys wouldn't mind, it'd be helpful. Whatever is public, I'm not asking you to sell anything that's not public, but what are your investments in the ecosystem, in the Solana ecosystem, since we're talking about it?
Yeah, I guess I could start with ourselves. So for Race Capital specifically, we're one of the initial seed investors for FTX, the exchange, when they first got started, and then we were also the lead seed investor for Saber when the protocol project was being put together. There's two other projects that we are large seed investors in, although both of those are unannounced. I probably won't say them right
Yeah, that's
now.
fine. Yeah, just whatever is public. What about you, Imran? What in the Solana space are you behind?
Yeah, so we are investors in Phantom, Pyth, Mercurial Finance, Port Finance, Synthetify. We took an early approach to Solana because one is we run DeFi Alliance is an accelerator program, and they were one of our first ecosystem partners. So we've been working pretty early with Solana to develop curriculum and a DeFi track that will help scale up DeFi startups or DeFi founders are building on Solana. And we also have a very close relationship with Jump as being one of the founding members of the DeFi Alliance. So we work pretty closely with them on onboarding the first wave of Solana founders into the ecosystem. So I would say that's kind of the area that we look at.
You mentioned Pyth there. Before the call, we were talking about Pyth. Pyth is interesting. It's kind of like Visa. It's a collaboration of competitors. Creating this high fidelity oracle, which is pretty interesting. If you're an investor, could you explain a little bit more about why Pyth sort of sees itself as a different oracle network? Because I think it's pretty interesting.
It's super cool. Like today, if you look at Chainlink, which is also a great product on Ethereum, the way they source data is through data nodes that are being ran by all of the data providers that are running the infrastructure. So they have data that streams into the nodes that then ultimately gets input into Ethereum or through Chainlink through Ethereum. And so the way Pyth takes its data, it's through large market makers and trading firms that are operating in the public equity space, because all of the data is actually very important for DeFi and crypto generally. So if you think about the way S&P 500 tracks, or if the price of Microsoft tracks, those are all important data. And so the data gets streamed through these large market makers and trading firms, and that happens through their actual prop trading. So the prop trading that they do, the data behind that gets filtered through Pyth, and then ultimately gets provided into Solana. And that data, like the data they provide, isn't available on Ethereum or any of the chains today. So imagine the types of products that could be built if that data was available. We're talking every stock that's traded on NASDAQ, S&P 500, and everywhere else globally on different exchanges globally, like the Shanghai. So once that data gets turned on, you get to see a whole host of different derivative products and exchanges that are being built around that data. And the second aspect of this is Jump has built out Wormhole as well, which is essentially bridges outside of Solana to other layer ones. So you could think about it from this perspective, that data could be streamed into Ethereum, it could be streamed into Terra, it could be streamed into other layer ones that can build the same product. So so that's pretty much it from that side.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, and one thing when I talked to Jump about it a little while back, a thing that was compelling, they said was like they don't. It's fast enough, has high enough bandwidth that they don't have to just average all the data sources, but they can also put a confidence index on every data source, so it's more precisely averaged. So it's just very fine grained. That's pretty cool. Cool. Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know. Anything else you guys want to say about the? Okay. So actually, going back to the whole Ethereum thing, and to your point, Imran, is I guess if we had an ETH maxi here listening to your story about how it's expensive on Uniswap and whatever, they'd be like, well, that's why we have Optimism and Arbitrum, so what's the advantage of Solana over these L2s, which are, quite fast and cheap too?
So I would say that there's enough for everyone to live and be happy. So the market right now, it's a small pie and we're all competing for that. But ultimately, I think Ethereum is also going to be very successful with the rollout of Arbitrum, Optimistic, and ZK Sync and others. And I also think that Solana is going to be successful. And I also think that other layer ones will be successful as well. But I think if you look at it from a global perspective, if you want all of what's happening in Web2 to be transacted in Web3, there's going to be different use cases that will attract different types of products. And I think with Solana specifically, it's going to be really on the finance side, whereas I see all the other chains focus on just different sectors.
Cool.
Yeah.
Anything you want to add on? Yeah, go for it, Chris.
Yeah, I guess to add to that, I wouldn't, I guess maybe my only comment otherwise is I might not restrict it to just purely financial realm. I actually think this is pretty broadly applicable to many, many other types of general transactions, if you will. But yes, if we want to scale this to internet scale, or again, if we're looking at the Web2 comparisons of either all the social networks, all the financial firms, all the fintech companies, this stuff needs to scale to billions, if not hundreds of millions of users. It's a much harder path to do that otherwise, especially when you're sort of breaking up the single chain into either sort of multiple sub chains or side chains or these layer 2 solutions. Again, you're sort of fractionalizing the liquidity, and these kind of things become its own ecosystem. And then, by the way, this makes it a lot harder from a development perspective too, because then you need to kind of build and develop for all of these different characterizations. When in sort of at its ultimate state, it's much easier to construct it from a single pool, single asset, single ecosystem. So at least to me, it just from a pure development perspective, it's a much kind of easier thing to build upon. Like you really keep the sort of Lego building blocks, liquidity, all of that kind of in one chain, in one ecosystem. But to Imran's point, all this stuff is still super early. Even if you compare this to our legacy financial infrastructure, not so much like the fintech apps, but all the stuff underneath that runs it, the whole crypto space as a whole is so infinitesimally small, where we really shouldn't be infighting between each other. We should be going after and attacking the big markets. And then once we've won those, then we could all sort of fight against each other. But right now, nothing, including Solana, including Ethereum, including Bitcoin, nothing has won like the really big pie of financial markets. Like we need to go and do that first. And then we
Yeah.
can kind of fight against each other.
Well, so on an investor level, I guess one thing I was thinking about going into this is, you know, I was doing some work this week. I have a story I'm probably going to do about Solend, which, you know, Chris, you helped me find them, and they're kind of compound on Solana, basically. And it sort of made me think going into this call, like if you're say, imagine that you're a 2018 compound investor, you thought money markets in the blockchain were a good idea. Does that mean now that we're in a world in which some other blockchains kind of have some life, should you be going out and buying every copy on every other decent blockchain that comes along? Like, is it crazy if you're a compound investor not to back Solend, or do you stick with your original horse? Like, what's the correct, you know, you bought this thesis of a money market on the blockchain. What's the move as new blockchains rise up? Let's go with you, Chris, first.
Yeah, it's a really fair and good question. I don't, from an investment perspective, I don't know if it necessarily makes sense to buy all the ones across every single chain. You think, you know, lending, borrowing is going to win, so buy them all, categorize them. You know, I think to some extent you do need to pick and choose, and these ecosystems do have very different characteristics. Some might be built for mass decentralization, some might be built for the financial asset itself, some might be built for internet scale, and TBD on which one of these ultimately wins out. But as an investor, like, unfortunately, we can't invest in everything, from, you know, budgetary constraints to portfolio construction to, you know, financial models. Like you do need to pick your bets. But there will probably be cross commonalities within different ecosystems. So borrowing and lending it's a pretty core financial primitive that's going to be used by many other applications on top. So every ecosystem is probably going to have their own version of borrowing, lending in it in some way. And at least for the Solana ecosystem, Solana is one of the kind of larger ones in there. They just crossed the 10 million in deposits mark. I think they have like 40 or 50 million in total borrows as well. So from a sort of pure traction standpoint, they're like one of the early kind of leading contenders for it. But again, all the stuff within the Solana ecosystem is still pretty new. So a lot of these things are kind of being kind of rebuilt and reformatted and remade for this ecosystem specifically.
Yeah, I would agree.
Imran, what do you think?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with Chris and how he thinks about, you know, how a lot of this is going to be replicated on other chains. The one example I always give is, you know, there's over 5,000 lenders in the United States. I mean, if you look at it from a global perspective, there's just so many different types of use cases that we're going to start to see. And so like these money market protocols that are building on chains, you know, there'll be generalizable ones and there'll be specific ones. There will be ones that are much more composable. We'll see more products being built that are more towards fixed rate versus variable rate. And so I think the world is our oyster, right? And I think we're still in the very early innings of what's being built on all of these chains here.
But what about other examples? Like there's going to be an OpenSea on every chain. There's going to be an NFT marketplace on every chain, right? Like if you believe in NFTs, I don't know, should you buy, you know, get a little bit of equity in each of those marketplaces? And not just doing compound, but there's other things too that they'll be copied over and over again.
Yeah, I was going to say, sorry, just to add on to the other one, I just did a quick search. If you look globally, worldwide, the lending market as a whole is over $8 trillion.
Right. Yeah.
So again, it's good always to, and maybe like before this, I used to work at Greylock Partners. Like we looked at most things more in like traditional space. It sometimes is always good to level set and to really understand like how early we are. It's not just like we're a little bit early, we're super early. And
super early, yeah.
There's not going to be one borrowing and lending winner that's going to take over it all and get 99.9% of market share. Doesn't happen in the normal world, probably not going to happen in crypto world. You'll probably see it accumulate to a few players, maybe across a few different ecosystems, but this is a huge space. There's going to be a ton of winners in it. And I would say the same thing on the NFT side. NFT side it's a new concept, new thing, new place. But again, when you look at collectibles and fine arts and cars and other stuff, there are multiple marketplaces for these things. So I would also assume it not just to aggregate purely based on one. I will think
Mhm.
there will be multiple winners, including different ecosystems as well.
But like, I mean, just to push back on that a little bit, sometimes the internet does cause this concentration of an idea. Like, for example, I mean, eBay is sort of the only auction site for like random crap, you know? I mean, like Amazon has its sort of pathetic version, but like eBay does rule that, right? Because there is a point at which if everything is equally far away, it's good to have one thing. So I don't know.
Just as an FYI, I've got a couple points and stuff.
I don't know
I
what's
would,
happening right now.
I would just,
That's not on because I go today or first thing Monday. If we don't talk again, because I know you've had a crazy
Does
week.
everybody else hear somebody else in the
Yes.
room with us?
How do we,
Yeah,
mute this
this is
person?
I don't know.
A
A little excitement for us. We're being DDoSed.
Cool.
Thanks, Laura. Have a great weekend as well. I'll talk to you on Monday.
Too much
Ryan, if
alpha
you
in
can
our
hear
talk.
us, your audio is on.
Oh shit! Sorry.
It's okay.
Sorry, everyone.
I would just counter Brady. I would just counter that with saying that if you look at it from a global perspective,
Mhm.
you know, there's Alibaba and
Oh no, we're losing. Imran was making a great point.
there's Geo, many of the marketplaces within India. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Chris, did you hear all that?
Yeah, cool. Yeah,
No, it's breaking up a little bit, but I could
Could
hear
you-
you now.
Could you do
Yeah,
it
I'll-
again, Imran? Because I think you were
Yeah.
making a good point.
Yeah, I think from a marketplace perspective, there's Geo Alliance from India that operates many marketplaces like Flipkart and others in India, and there's there's China. You have Alibaba there with its other marketplaces, and then Russia and etc. So I do think like we could gravitate towards geo specific products, but the only issue that I have with that is that now that the world is becoming blended with the metaverse, the question is going to be how is the world going to be organized on the internet versus geopolitically? So that's the only
Yeah.
question that I have.
Yeah.
Well, it is a good question. I do think language is going to continue to be powerful. Sorry, keep going, Chris.
Oh yeah, and then I was going to say, which you also sort of see in the Web2 example, which happened with both eBay and Craigslist very strongly. You're probably familiar with the sort of whole Craigslist ecosystem app. As soon as one player gets to significant scale, everybody starts to piece off all the specific verticals.
Yeah.
And so when you look at housing or auto or fine art or cars or all this specific stuff, it tends to get much more specialized. And some of these subcomponents could actually sometimes rival or sometimes even be more valuable than the initial kind of aggregated player as well. So I don't think we're anywhere near that level of scale or interest in the crypto space yet, but I would imagine there's basically also going to repeat this pattern of aggregated, decentralized, aggregated into multiple players, verticalization, specialized. Because I remember like when I was at Greylock, like looking back at the crypto space back at the 2014-15 timeframe, Bitcoin was the only thing that was the crypto space. And in 2017, Ethereum really helped open up the spectrum. But now when you look at the crypto space today, crypto is actually like a pretty broad thing. There's all the way from creator economies to arts, to NFTs, to DeFi, to layer one, to technical solutions, to middleware. It's a pretty broad ecosystem. So we're already starting to see some level of specialization, but I would imagine this to actually get to accelerate much, much more as the space gets bigger.
So Imran, you brought up something I wanted to talk about and just kind of to specifically pick your brain about is you brought the metaverse, which to me kind of the pre-metaverse is this DAOification of everything that's happening in crypto right now. And you're a part of Venture DAO, which is something that I've always meant to look into more. So tell us about it now. How did Venture DAO start, and like what's your involvement there, and kind of how is it different as an investor than other investing activities that you do?
Yeah, I joined a year and a half later before it was formed, but it was essentially formed around Moloch version 1, which was designed by Amin Soleimani, which is the first DAO infrastructure. And then Peter Pan, one of the first like emerging DAO leaders in the space, really took that idea to life and started to bring more and more constituents together to start to think about how do you invest, how do we give one access to the community for like these larger private deals, and then number two, is there a way to organize from a social perspective additional benefits and service to the founders that aren't being received by, let's say, like your traditional funds. So I've been talking to Peter for a long time about this, and then I joined like a year and a half ago, and it's very different, and it's different in many ways. One is that community sourcing is actually a competitive advantage, because when you have 80 people, or let's say 50 people in one DAO, they're all on the same level, they're all working together to build this kind of like venture style fund. You could see deals from all over the world, and it's actually like really interesting. And so I would say asymmetry in terms of information is very high. And I can pause here and answer any questions, but I can keep going.
Well, like, I guess I'd be curious, how does decision making work? Like, do you all have like a token and you just vote when if things make it that far along, everyone's just like in or out of what this deal,
Yeah.
or I don't know.
So yeah,
Okay.
once you invest in the fund, you're allocated certain voting rights based on how much you invested, and then those voting rights would go based on every decision that the DAO makes. So essentially, we have a filtration process of 5 phases, and all the way from like sourcing a deal to closing a deal. And it's really upon the community to decide which one that they're most excited about, and that person kind of drives it home. And then towards the end, we have a vote, and then everyone votes, and after that, we know whether or not we're going to make the investment to opportunity. So it's very just like a beehive of like really, really smart people. We have like folks like Stanny, founder of Audius, many others that are like collectively working as a group to figure out like what's the best opportunities we should invest in, and then also support the founders moving forward.
Chris, are you any DAOs like this that are kind of making investing decisions, or I don't know, buying weird NFTs or any of that kind of stuff?
Not as much. I have experimented far less in this realm. I'm very personally intrigued by this stuff. Maybe the closest was, I guess I'm part whatever that means, of like the Jenny DAO. That one is constructed around like the Uniquely ecosystem, and it's much more around like collecting collectibles and NFT objects and sort of private, sort of customized things that people make for the DAO itself. It's honestly, it's much more of a fun thing. Like I've heard about the stuff, but I have not experienced the process of it and setting it up and doing all that. And so I wanted to join kind of one of these things early on just to see for myself how it works. But no, I guess transparently for me, this is an area I have not explored as much.
Well, I think the fun aspect is one of the things I find kind of interesting about these DAOs. And I think there's just all different levels. It sounds like venture DAO is pretty serious. It probably takes, some real money to get in there, but I think there's some others that are, a little more low key, even though you probably need to buy in and stuff like that. And it's like it's interesting that these things can you can make money in them and they can have a real mission, but also becomes like a society for people. Like they spend Friday nights hanging out in Discord and stuff or whatever. I don't know. That seems like an interesting new development in this space.
Yeah, I guess the other one I failed to mention. So the DAO ecosystem in the Solana space is very new. A lot of this tooling doesn't exist. A lot of the like there's no sort of equivalent of Snapshot for Solana yet. Outside of Discord, there's no way to kind of logically create these things yet. There's a few tools being built. The one I am a part of, whatever that means, is there's the DAO in the Solana space called the Monkey DAO. It's for people who own the Solana monkey business NFTs. So I own a bunch of the monkeys, and the DAO, it's more of a social club. It's less of a investment thing or whatever, but it's really cool. Like people are super active. Like they're really on top of all the various NFT drops and what's happening and valuation models and all this sort of stuff. And so I hang out in there and ask usually dumb questions and post stuff or whatever. Yeah, I don't know. That's more of like it's not a serious investing one. It's more just like a fun one for people, especially on the collector side, to hang out in.
Yeah. Are you in more, Imran?
Not on Solana, but there is a startup that we're supporting called Squads, and they're essentially building out, DAO infrastructure to allow anyone to spin up DAOs on Solana, which is really cool. And so I think what's going to end up happening, like 5 to 10 years down the line, it could happen 2 months. I don't know. Crypto moves pretty crazy. But what I can say is that as parts of the internet starts to become investable, there's just a whole host of things that you can invest in, billions of things, right? And so we're going to start to see more and more younger folks and people that are very like crypto investor native that will start to organize DAOs pretty quickly so they can come together and invest in things together. You're already starting to see this happen. I mean, we started with like a few DAOs a year ago to now we have like hundreds of DAOs all looking to just invest in just NFTs and like other kind of like internet type opportunities. And so I wouldn't be surprised if we see like, $1 million in like 12 to 18 months. Like it's very easy for us to scale that way.
So, Imran, you were talking about, this is the thing I always like to talk about with investors when I think regular people are listening. You were talking about an advantage of Venture DAO is you've got a lot of eyes out there to source deals. Yep. I know deal sourcing is complicated in the investor world these days because there's a lot of money out there. And I'm sure this to regular folks, this seems crazy. Like if you've got money, people should be knocking on your door, right? But could you guys sort of explain why that is tough these days and like, and what those giant pools of money, mean for investors, working to get good deals today?
I mean, Chris, please feel free.
Yeah, maybe when I'll talk about the challenges, and then two, I could talk about some more specific stuff I specifically do. One, the challenge is why, if you have a bunch of money and you want to invest, it's not like the entrepreneurs flock to you. Like you got to do some work, unfortunately. A big reason why is because there's a lot more funds today than there was 10 years ago. So the space is, it's competitive. There's tons of pre-seed funds, seed funds, crypto hedge funds, DAOs, all different players trying to find things at the earliest stage. And so for that reason, and because these things can be so valuable, people give high valuations, they act super fast, there are different considerations for them. And so you as an investor, you got to be ready. You got to have unique sources of deal flow. You got to have your unique network that you pull from. You got to be people that you can quickly reference people. You got to have a prepared mind. You got to know your portfolio allocation, what you want to do. You got to have the buy-in from all your partners if you're part of an official firm or whatever. But like you got to be ready and you got to bring your A game. This isn't for like I think people sometimes have this conception of VCs get to go sit on the beach and hang out and all the entrepreneurs come to them. Unfortunately, this is not the case, at least not for me. I don't know if I can speak for everybody. I guess from a more personal perspective, so before Raise Capital was formed, I was actually one of the earliest seed investors for Solana itself. And so back when Anatoly and Raj were like literally first forming the company, we helped them join my partner now, Edith, she at the time was a GP at 500 Startups, and we helped them join the 500 Startups Blockchain Accelerator, work with them super hands-on for the first year or two of the life of the company itself. And so this whole kind of new emerging ecosystem on Solana, I've just personally tried to be like as helpful as possible to anybody building anything in the Solana space. I've tried to give a ton of advice. I've tried to help people where I can. I've paired people up with smart contract auditing firms, people who joined a lot of these protocols early on. I've acted as a personal angel for a lot of these things. I've acted as an LP for a lot of these things. But back when nobody really believed in this space, when it was really early, when there wasn't a lot of attention put on it now, it's easier to see it today and all the success it's had. But back then, the Solana ecosystem did have a little bit slower time kind of getting off the ground. And right. So through a lot of those relationships and people, I guess in the DAO sense, I use a lot of the people I've helped early on as my eyes and ears in the ecosystem, and sort of helping to surface good things in the space, good people who are working on new stuff. And again, I've always just tried to be as helpful as possible, even for things we do not necessarily invest in. So a ton of stuff like, again, I've tried to help as much as I can, even when we have no position.
Cool. What about you, Imran? How does an investor fight for good deals in this world today?
It ultimately comes down to how we always talk about like how do you help founders and the types of services that you provide, like Chris has mentioned earlier on. And so yeah, we're seeing some deals being cannibalized because larger funds have raised in the billions, and we're seeing more and more traditional funds that are coming into the space. So for gaming, we're starting to see more gaming VCs that are traditional to the space that are coming to crypto. Consumer, like there's consumer like generalist VCs that are coming in. So there's a good and bad to this, right? The bad is obviously it has to become a little bit more competitive in the landscape. The good is that we're getting mass adoption, right? So we're starting to see more and more products that blur the lines between crypto specific projects versus how they're looking to attract the masses or the retail. And so there's a good bet. So we're going to start to see more and more founders are coming to the space. And the question is just going to be, what are the value propositions that you can build as a firm that can attract those founders to your fund? And so what we're going to start to see is like funds are going to become more specific in different categories, similar to what the traditional world has become. Like before, like, you know, it like for Polychain to invest in like DeFi, then consumer, it was fine back then because there were only a few VCs that had capital. But now as the world becomes much bigger and more of the Web2 stuff starts to come on Web3, we're going to start to see verticalization of different sectors where people are going to start to just say, you know what, this is where my niche is and this is where I'm going to focus my time on.
So we've only got like 2 minutes left. I want to ask you guys a 2-part question, but give me super quick answers to them. So the first question is, so DeFi was what was big in crypto in 2020. NFTs are kind of it this year. What's your bet for 2022? And kind of the inverse of that question is, be honest with me. What did you think about NFTs in 2019? Let's start with you, Imran.
2019, I'll be honest. I thought it was going to be another couple of years before we would get mass adoption. And then once we started the uptick in February, we started to invest heavily in the space. So I was definitely caught off guard by NFTs. But we pivoted our investment strategy pretty quickly to start investing in NFTs. So what's
your call for 2022? What's your pick of the big thing for 2022?
I think we're going into a DAO renaissance right now. And then I think that will enable more social communities on the internet.
All right, Chris, give me your 2 answers there.
Yeah, I guess my prediction, what I think will be big that is not so obvious today. I was involved a lot like with the big cloud ecosystem when it first started, which a lot of people in the crypto world hate, but I actually think there's a lot of interesting things they did on the creator and social side. I think we're going to see this category emerge generally. I think they touched upon something which is very transferable to a bunch of other things. And Solana lends itself very well because of the transaction cost, speed, and throughput for a lot of these things. And again, that's my more non-obvious one. All the DeFi, NFT stuff everybody knows about, but that's a little bit the less explored area. And then to your second question, I guess on the NFT side, I've always had an interesting relationship with it because I do a lot of work more on the creator side too. So I do a lot of photography. I've been doing it for a long time. I was the National Geographic Photographer of the Year in 2016. And so I personally wanted to go through the whole process of actually taking one of my photographs, go through the minting process. I've been an early creator for many of the platforms on Ethereum when they first started. I'm doing a full NFT project on Solana called Playground, which is coming out soon. It was just announced by Raydium. This is all more personal stuff that I just like to do more from like the artist creator side. But I think the space is very fascinating and like there's a ton of stuff to like learn about it. It's very kind of new and still very underexplored.
And that was your take in 2019 too? You felt good about it?
Yeah, I was not to as large of a scale, but I was definitely experimenting with a lot of this stuff. Again, mostly from an artist perspective, not so much from the investment side. Like I don't think I fully, and still probably don't fully realize how big some of these markets can be. But at least from the artist perspective, it makes a lot of sense.
Cool. Well, great to talk to you guys on this NFT thing. I did a fun story today about how much eBay is tanking on NFTs because they are there as announced and promised, and you should all go take a look at what their NFT offerings are like because it's very amusing. Thanks a ton to Imran and Chris for being here and talking to us, and for Solana for hosting this conversation. Have a great day, you guys.
You too. Thank you.
Thanks, Brady, for hosting it, for moderating as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Peace, guys.